I would just like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we're gathered, the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that thanks to any elders who may be present today. So as Katie said, I'm a bit of a polymath. I have a lot of strings to my bow, which I now realise is one of the many wonderful things about my autism. But as I was preparing to speak today, Katie asked me to think about the notion of what I wish I'd known when I was younger. So, as you've just heard, I am one of the growing number of women diagnosed with autism spectrum conditions later in life. My congratulations moment came last year when I was 36. Some people responded like this was something new. Oh, now she's autistic? But as I and those, I feel like that is relatable to many of you, as I and those closest to me knew, I had been autistic since birth. Like many who receive a diagnosis later on, the news provided me with a filter and a framework within which I could understand almost everything that had happened in my life leading up to that point. It explained why I could master some complex skills with laser-like focus. One of the most common things people say to me is, "How are you so good at that too?" And it also explained my wit and my unconventional approach to my writing, my deep empathy, and why I found it so satisfying to stand in the fruit shop patting a watermelon for 5 minutes straight. See also bag of rice, eggplant. But it also explained the way I spent my early school years mimicking cool girls and TV characters in an occasionally vain attempt to make friends. The 2 years I spent echoing everything I just said under my breath immediately after I said it. The social anxiety, the nose-picking to the point of self-harm, the crushing homesickness that made sleepovers and school camps a fraught experience, the laissez-faire approach to deodorant, the confusion around gender, the merciless bullying at school, rampant anxiety and depression, the unfinished university courses, the way I felt confused and dizzy in busily decorated public spaces and shirked from certain sounds that others didn't seem to be able to hear, and the tantrums. Oh, the tantrums. Now, as a happy and reasonably confident autistic woman, I can see that those tantrums were in fact meltdowns. So when I think about what I wish I'd known when I was younger, the answer clear as day is, I wish I knew I was autistic. Friends and family members of daughters who they suspect are on the spectrum and are considering getting them assessed often ask me, I'm really worried that she's going to be labelled. And it's true that growing up is difficult for everyone, except for maybe that one school friend of mine who was a ballroom dancing champion. And it's true that a label like autistic or Aspie or on the spectrum might seem scary to consider for your daughter or loved one. But when you're growing up well aware of the fact that you're very different from your peers, sometimes a label is the very thing you need. And there are worse ones. Some of the labels that were applied to me before we had a framework with which to understand and support my behaviour included difficult, angry, selfish, remedial, incompetent, weird, and a number of ableist slurs that I won't repeat here. Or the day I looked at my sports teacher's notes and discovered that I, until that moment, someone who enjoyed running, had inappropriate arm swing. Cue 15 years of avoiding sports and exercise. If someone had taken me aside at 10 or 15 and explained something along the lines of, your brain is so good at some things, like art and performing, that it doesn't have much room left for others, like maths or socialising, a huge weight would have been lifted from my shoulders. Labels like dumb or incompetent have a habit of sticking. Once we leave school, it may be that nobody calls us those things out loud, but those words burrow down into our minds and memories. I'm now a PhD candidate, having received my master's with a high distinction in 2017. But prior to that, I dropped out of 3 different university courses across a decade. There was always a part of me that thought back to school and went, yeah, you're probably too dumb for this. Now, as one of only 10 Vice-Chancellor's scholars at RMIT, I can see that it was precisely because of my unique and autistic approach to research and writing that my PhD proposal was received so warmly. Often, when autistic people focus on the positives, in inverted commas, we're accused of a rose-tinted view of the world. Surely, neurotypical people exclaim, being autistic is actually terrible news and a tragedy. And sure, I won't lie to you, there are many challenges that I continue to face on a daily basis, even as an autistic woman with reasonably low support needs. In the privacy of my own room, I'm still prone to meltdowns. Rest in peace, the DVD cover that I couldn't open, so I attacked with a chisel and a hammer shortly before jumping on it like Donald Duck. It still didn't open. Who knew? There are some behaviours and tics that I just don't talk about with neurotypical people because I know that to them they are utterly abject. But I have truly come to see my autism as not just the icing on top of some of my triumphs and strengths, but actually key to them and the entire cake. I'm certainly not alone in this. Autistic women like Professor Temple Grandin, comedian Hannah Gadsby, and former Olympic swimmer turned writer and artist Casey Legler have all discussed the role their autistic thinking plays in their work. All of them, as I have found the thing they love, their special interest, and found a way to incorporate it into their working lives. But for those ladybugs out there who are still 5 or 10 years away from the working world, or who, like me, mistrust late capitalism and the neoliberal notion that we all need to work, take that special interest and make it a full-time hobby. There is no surer insurance against depression. For me, one of my most special interests, as Katie mentioned, has always been making costumes and props and dressing up. I've been that guy at the costume party ever since I was about 3. And I've never been more profoundly depressed than the 2 or so years within which I told myself, staring down the pressures of neurotypical expectation of adulthood, that dressing up was for kids and I should spend my money and time elsewhere. Now I dress up 4 or 5 times a year. A decade ago I discovered the cosplay world and it never looked back. I even managed to turn that special interest into paid work, teaching a short course at RMIT in thermoplastics and costume fabrication techniques. Ironically enough, cosplay has also introduced me to many of my neurodiverse friends. Nerds, who knew? Without the understanding of my autistic place in the universe, anxiety and depression were a huge part of my life, and I am in fact diagnosed triple threat, autistic, anxiety and depression. And that is not to say that now that I understand my autism, I'm completely free of either, but I know why some traditionally neurotypically geared approaches to anxiety and depression didn't work for me. If we subscribe to the social model of disability, and I think we should, then I often wonder how much of my anxiety and depression was a normative response to existing as neurodiverse in a neurotypical world. Do I feel anxious and panicked in the library at university because there's something wrong with me? Or is it because the carpet is ridiculously patterned, the walls are glass, the stairs are floating steps that I have huge gaps in them that make me feel like I'm going to fall down them? Am I incapable of holding down a real job, or is the modern open plan office designed in such a way that it creates sensory overload? When autistic people talk about creating a world that is sensory friendly, some neurotypicals bristle at the notion, like we're suggesting we want everybody wrapped in cotton wool, which I admit would be very comfy. The irony is, in a sensory friendly world, much like a more accessible world, is better for everybody, including neurotypicals. I've worked from home as a freelance journalist for the majority of my adult life because there I can control the environment around me. When I briefly worked in the office at a major newspaper, I felt ashamed that I apparently couldn't handle the fast-paced world of journalism, and I left after 6 months. Autistic girls and women, you may be aware, are champions at feeling shame. Now I know how much the noise and the furnace-like thermostat of the open plan office had to do with my reduced capacity to work and create in that environment. And I bet if those features were addressed, the general stress levels of the staff would be greatly lowered. And God knows people in print media have got enough stress on their plates in this day and age. So now that, a little joke for myself, so now that I know what I know, what wisdom can I impart to fellow ladybugs and their families, young and old? Firstly, if anybody tries to say, well, aren't we all a bit on the spectrum? Shut them down. No, we're not. The autism spectrum begins and ends with autism. It doesn't start at neurotypical, even if some of us are very good at pretending to exist in that world. I like to think of it like Pokemon, which itself is a very autistic metaphor. But if we think about individual autistic traits as Pokemons, your average person might have a few of them. They may also have social anxiety or a sensitivity to light or sound. But in order to officially get on the spectrum, you have to, as it were, catch them all. And then, depending on where you sit on the spectrum, some of your Pokemon might be more evolved than others. Listen, I just really love Pokemon. Also, I encourage people, especially neurotypical people who know and love autistic people, to reject functioning labels. They have a very checkered history that I don't have time to decry here, but in short, high functioning is used to deny support and low functioning is used to deny agency. The neurotypical world places a high premium on talking as the only form of communication. Autistic people know that there are many ways to communicate, and there are some so-called non-verbal autistic people writing some of the most elegant and emotionally insightful novels and poetry around. I might be considered high functioning. In fact, it wasn't until I started trying to write screenplays that I realised I really struggled with emotions. So thanks, screenwriting. This is really funny and well plotted, Clem, but we just don't understand what any of the characters are thinking or feeling. Neither do I. We just don't know what the lead character's problem is. She seems a lot like you. So the worst thing about anxiety and negative thinking for me is how real it feels at the time, and I think that's true of anybody who experiences anxiety. And it's especially true in childhood and adolescence, and I do think a more careful, softly approach is appropriate for younger people. But for the ladybugs who are a bit older, you could try my favourite anti-anxiety exercise, which I call the bin. So you get yourself one of those cute little bins that you can get from office supply shops or a jar, whatever. Every time you say or think something negative about yourself, write it down, fold it up and put it in the bin. After a week, you get to take them out and read them. Believe me, you will be roaring with laughter. It's a really great way to realise that sometimes the worst anxious thoughts are just that, thoughts, also the worst. Next, find some portable stims to take with you in moments you might feel stressed out. To anybody else, this is just a pen, and this is just a laptop cover. But to those in the know, so stingy. I've also finally realised how important exercise and activity is for battling depression. I know none of us want to hear that. Think back to the sports teacher's notes, inappropriate arm swing, and how they ruined my love of organised movement for years. When I used to get angry if somebody suggested exercise might help my low mood, I now see it was buried trauma about sports class. Try lots of things and see what you like. It might be dancing or yoga or boxing or running. One of my autistic friends is really into Muay Thai at the moment and she wants to spar with me and I'm really scared. Equine therapy is wonderful for Asperger's girls. I have discovered weightlifting 3 years ago and never looked back. And once again, I've met many fellow autistic people in that world and we all get very mad when the plates aren't put back in order. But the biggest advice I can give to parents of autistic girls and to autistic women young and old is to embrace autism and use it to help you find your tribe. When I visit my younger autistic relatives who live interstate without much support, we all relish being able to, as I put it, tune in to the alien frequencies. And we monologue about special interests and stim together for hours. When you're young and you feel like nobody understands you, or even when you're older and feel that way, there's nothing like meeting other autistic people who can say, yeah, me too. Yes, when you first receive the news or have your suspicions, the word autistic might stick in your throat. You might tie yourself up in knots trying to describe it any other way, spectrum-y, ASD, or some other euphemism. But I think the number one way to combat depression and anxiety in girls and women with autism is to embrace it. So if you're like me and you're autistic, I reckon that's rad. And so do so many other people, so get out there and meet them. Thank you.